right? Did you say yes?
Yes.
Okay. I will call the Finance Committee meeting for May 25th to order. Roll call. Alder Corpus Dax.
Here.
Alder Johnson, who once again his lips moved, he's here. And Alder Dorf is here. And probably Alder Galvin will be here in a minute, but we will begin. I will take a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes, Finance Committee minutes from May 11th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Alder Corpus Dax, second by Alder Brian Johnson. All those say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are on to regular business, and Alder Galvin has joined us. The best Alder ever, District 4, has joined us because your name has not changed. All right. Consideration with possible action on the room tax stabilization fund agreement with Brown County and selection of a funding source to pay the June 2021-2013 RDA KI2 bond. So staff.
That is me. So the situation is the room tax stabilization fund it does not have enough funds in it to complete the entire waterfall. So the county's position is that the entirety of the annual payment for the RUSH funds and the KI1 funds have to be paid before application can be made to the KI2 funds. KI2 funds are still backed by the city. So if there's a shortfall in that, the city has to pay for them. So at this point, we have to identify the means to actually make that payment. So there's a couple of different options. First is the agreement provides that we have with the room tax stabilization fund that is that there's a $500,000 account. It's a reserve fund reserved specifically to pay for KI2. So our bond payment, KI2, it will pay for it in the event of a shortfall. Our bond payment, I believe, is $750 for June. And I'll leave Diana to answer all the numbers, but it's about $750. So we're still short. But and we're talking about having a potential shortfall for both the June payment, which is due next week, and the December payment. So what we are figuring out to fund right now is the bond payment for June, which is $750. We could use that $500,000, and then there is Diana referred to, I think, a capital account that's for KI, and so that amount could be used for it. And so there's still, I believe, about $85,000 that still needs to be figured out that could potentially be paid for by levy. The second option, the county offered to allow the city to essentially take a loan from the room tax stabilization fund. But in exchange for that, we would not be able to tap the $500,000 payment. And we would also need to repay any amounts that are not ultimately covered by room tax revenue that is generated if there's ever a shortfall in paying one or RUSH 1 or KI1. So that we tried to negotiate that down, saying that once the room tax stabilization fund is back in the black and operating well, it should be considered like an advancement. We should get credit for the amounts of room tax that we're generating. And after a certain number of years were given, because the account should cover it, and that was rejected. So that's the second option, is to go back to the county and try to negotiate a better approach to that. And then, of course, the last option is to pay the whole thing using levy dollars. We were asked originally by the county to apply ARPA funds to it. The problem is that ARPA does not allow for debt service payment. That's very clear, so that can't happen. There's the potential to fund tourism related to, we think that maybe there's some creativity possible if all the communities got together and agreed to it. But right now, there's definitely not an option for the city to be able to fund that exclusively. Any shortfall that would come up, because we're looking at it at a pretty substantial number. So that's what's in front of you guys. If you guys want to go into closed session to talk about negotiating with the county, we can do that. Otherwise, I will turn it over to you all.
I have a question because I looked at the American Rescue Plan Act, and definitely we didn't get the funds because of COVID-19. I mean, it was a direct impact on that. And is there something we can do? Because that is really why it was because of COVID-19 that we didn't rent out the rooms, we didn't get the room tax money.
So the ARPA funds are pretty clear that it cannot be for debt service. It's supposed to be for new services or things to generate, different ways to generate tourism within the community. So room tax revenue is definitely something that we would be entitled to recover by those towards. It's just that we can't turn around and apply it to our debt service.
Can we turn around and apply it to something else and then apply to something else to our debt service?
Well, that's what we were talking about, is that, maybe there's some opportunity for, if all the other municipalities are interested in it, maybe doing something where the CVB gets funded by it. If it's, we have to explore it to see if it's even an option. But yes, that is definitely something we're looking at, is can we free up the actual revenues that came from the room tax debt service so that the new stuff that's happening can be paid for elsewise. Unfortunately, we're just in a time crunch right now. There isn't any opportunity for us to really make these negotiations at this time, or to come up with a solution at this time, because the payment is due on Tuesday and should be paid on Friday, or Monday, and should be paid on Friday.
All right. I hate to step this back a bit, but I don't know if I misunderstood or I had an issue with my computer. I'm going to have to ask you to start from the beginning. What are we short on? And what do we have to pay? I heard something about a waterfall, and if you could just go over that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo Alder Galvin. I'm kind of lost on what's happening right now.
So what happened, we have to back up a lot. So when the expo hall was being developed, the county came to us and said we'd like to enter into a new cooperative governance agreement and a new pledge and security agreement. And as part of that, we will put the city's debt that was owed on KI2, which is the expansion of the KI, into the waterfall. So the way that happened is the room tax, all the money that all the communities generate, have to put it into a room tax. The commission has control of it. We put it all into room tax. We jointly apply those funds to fund whatever it is that we come up with as a room tax commission, or they come up with, I should say.
What is a waterfall for those people in the audience that don't know?
Let me get there. Okay. So then, after all the funds are put into this, they created Rush. They built the Rush Center using it. Schwabenon was the holder of that one. It's like a whole convoluted lease back situation, but ultimately, it is the county who's on the hook for those bond payments because it's being paid through a leasehold interest. So they're the ones who back those bonds. As part of that process, we also created the KI Center. So KI1, the original KI was created using those room tax stabilization funds. So the waterfall is, here's the debt for the Rush Center, and then whatever's left gets used to pay for the KI, and then whatever's left gets pushed down into the water. So that's what it's called. It's the waterfall, and each one of them is considered the way people are talking about it. So
who's paying for KI2 right now?
I'm sorry?
Is KI2 part of this whole mess?
Yes.
Where does that fall in here?
So KI2, so Diana can tell you exactly how they fall, but it was KI1, KI2, I'm sorry, Rush, K1, and then there's the CVB that gets a portion of it. There's some administrative that goes to, I think it's like 4% of the entire amount that goes to us and Schwabenon, 1% to each municipality. And then after that, we got placed into the waterfall with KI2, which is the bonds that the county didn't back, we backed. And so we're the ones who have to make that payment. We come after all of those in the waterfall. So now they've got enough money to pay KI1, they've got enough to pay Rush, and not enough to pay all of ours. Anything after the expo hall is after us still. So now the issue is, how do we pay it? Because when there's not enough money out of the stabilization fund, whoever's on the hook has to pay that debt payment now. If it was KI1 or the rest, it would be the county on the hook. But since those ones are covered, now it's the city who's on the hook.
Okay.
And to kind of make it a little even more complicated, KI2 is the only one that is not backed by the city. Everything else in that waterfall is backed by the county.
So we got our arms bent up back behind us by the county to cover their costs or part of the costs for the Resch Expo Center and the Veterans Arena that they're paying for with room tax money, part of it, and the half-cent sales tax. And the way they set it up was that Green Bay is at the bottom of the heap when it comes to the leftover money to pay. So we're short. If we weren't involved with this deal, would we have had enough money to pay, to make our payments this year?
Well, can I say something, Alder Galvin? We had a huge presentation. Do you remember a few years back, right? And we had to vote on it, didn't we, Director Ellenbecker? And yeah, that was the final, like, a compromise that Mayor Schmidt finally came up with, because we wanted more of the room tax and we weren't getting maybe any, and maybe we weren't entitled to get. We did get some finally. I mean, it was a huge deal.
Yeah, it
when
was.
Mayor Schmidt was here. It was a huge deal. But we voted that this is where we would end up. And now, because of COVID, we ended up here without the money. So
Wait a minute, is this because of COVID?
yeah, we weren't on that. Really, it's because of COVID, but we can't use the COVID funding, which I already asked, because you can't use it to pay debt service. Okay. But of course, the room tax is low because we didn't have people renting rooms, right?
All right.
And normally it would be fine.
Here's my next question. When is this money due? Like next week?
Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is, because I remember, and I wasn't one of them, but there have been alders during this whole COVID thing asking, where are we at with our finances? I mean, we didn't just find out this week we're going to be short next week, did we?
Yeah. Well,
No, not exactly. But keep in mind that the room tax is not a county account. A city account.
Not a city account.
It's maintained by the county. So they report to us and tell us when our payment's going to be due. We ask for the fund to be paid, and then they tell us there's not enough money in it.
So they did.
Oh, Anna's gonna
So
correct me.
please tell me, so as I'm understanding this, we asked the county for our money, and then they go, oh, geez, didn't we money? Is that basically what happened?
No, we didn't ask them for any money. The bill came dame and
Yeah,
there's not enough money to pay the bill.
But we went
Right.
to the piggy bank, which is the county, and they said there's not enough money. I mean, they could months ago that this was going to happen, and we could have been doing something sooner.
But how did they know? Because it's based on the amount of room tax that's
Well, they
taken
couldn't
in.
see what was coming into the room tax. I mean,
Yeah, how about you,
my-
Director Ellenbecker? You go. Go ahead, Diana.
So we have not been ignoring this. We've been watching it since last fall. We have been talking it at Room Tax Commission. We've been talking about it. We've been doing projections. We've been looking at the numbers. We knew the numbers were running low, but as Attorney Chavez has said, the way it works is as room tax comes in, make sure that it has enough money to pay what they call KI1 and Resch Center. Once those are full, then it goes into the next bucket, and eventually our debt service is the next bucket. So we were watching this since fall. Then we looked at it in spring. And in February, I got confirmation that my 6/1 payment was going to be paid by the county and that we might be a shortfall for December. So at this point, I didn't have a concern. We didn't need to bring it to your attention because as long as we had very conservative estimates, we've been watching it very close. In April, end of April, there was a statement that yes, there isn't enough to fill the first two debt payments, the KI and the Resch, but that's why we have a stabilization fund. that stabilization fund had enough money in it and that it would be able to cover those payments. And then there's enough to cover the KI2 payments. Right at the beginning, at very end of April, very beginning of May, we got information from the county that they were looking at the money, and they were nervous about the next debt payment for the KI1 and the Rush Center. And so at this point, they were making the determination that they wanted to hold that money and not pay the KI2 expansion. And that now we found out in the beginning of May that we weren't sure if they were going to pay our 6-1 payment at the beginning of May. I do actually have to request money from them. I have to put a requisition into them. They have 15 days prior to the payment. So May 15th is really owed us a response whether or not they were going to pay our debt. We've been in negotiations. We have a draft an agreement going back and forth between our attorneys. So we've been trying to come up with an agreement to try to determine and figure out how we were going to make this payment. At this point, we do not have an agreement settled. So we are still trying to look at different options. So this, just so you know, this has been looked at. We got confirmation again in February. There was enough money to make it through the 6-1 payment. Brown County has taken a slightly different turn as of the beginning of May and has decided that they were not going to pay our payment, that there wasn't enough in there for maybe the next payment for the KI and then the Rush Center, and that they were going to hold those funds and not pay our payment for June 1. So things have changed as the beginning of May. We've been working on a draft, going back and forth, an agreement. We have been working with the attorneys. We've been working with finance with our financial advisors. We are trying to find options and solutions to make this payment. So this, when last time we had a meeting was May 11th. We had just gotten our first draft agreement from Brown County. At that point, we thought we were going to be able to work something through. That's why it did not come through to finance at that point. We are now at a point where they've given us some options. We don't necessarily like the options they have given us, and we're still working through an attorney talk about when we're in negotiations.
Do we need to go into closed session now, then?
Well, I look at some of this. I think needs to be out in the open because I'm really concerned about how this is all coming down, and I'm starting to feel like the city's getting burned in this deal. And I think, unless I'm wrong, I don't see why that shouldn't be public knowledge, because a lot of people weren't wild about this agreement back several years ago when this all started. No one anticipated COVID, but no one anticipates a tornado or a hurricane or any other disaster that hits us. And I'm starting to feel like we've been taken advantage of, that they decide to hang on to this money because they're worried about themselves making their payment. But I don't see where they have any kind of concern about Green Bay making its a payment or how it's going to go about doing that when we're all in the same circumstances together. I thought we were all in this together, and now it feels like, yeah, odd man out, you're off the lifeboat. And
I get your outrage. So I think, Attorney Chavez, what do you suggest that can we talk about some of this in open session, or what is your legal opinion?
The only reason to go into closed session would be to discuss negotiation strategy for any agreement we might enter into with the county.
Which is where we're at, right? Isn't that kind of where we're at?
I'm trying to flesh this out a little bit more about how this comes down on being Green Bay's responsibility. And I'm concerned that, and I appreciate that you've been in negotiations with the county, but it mystifies me that they won't come to an agreement with us when they're the ones that kind of put us in this position. I mean, I thought we were all together, instead of we're the county and you're not kind of type of act. And this is disappointing to hear that they're not willing to work with us or help us out in this situation.
Alder Johnson?
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm with Alder Galvin. I think that there's still a little bit of fact finding here that I think we need to fully understand before we can negotiate. And I think the fact finding piece is absolutely appropriate in open session. And so when is this payment due? Next week?
We have to mail it by Friday.
Payment is due on June 1st. Our paying agent at Associated Bank takes care of the payment. So most of this money in the past has always been at Associated Bank in our trust in the room tax stabilization fund. And so he makes the transfer typically the day before. So right now, typically we would make the payment on May 28th. I did talk to Eric Weed this morning, and he said because the money is at the account, we couldn't have a decision as long as he had a decision by June 1st, he can make the transfer. Unfortunately, we have a council meeting on Tuesday night, and that would be after close of the day. So we would not be able to wait until June 1st. So that it is due on June 1st. Typically would have been done on probably the 28th, the last working day before it's due.
So what happens if we default and we don't make that payment? Because council's not, I assume council's got to take action on this. And if we don't meet until after the payment's due, you're going to need a special meeting at minimum, right?
What I would recommend in this instance, there are 7 alders on this meeting. It is noticed as a potential forum. If the alders are all in agreement as to action that should be taken, then we would seek ratification at the council meeting.
So we have to discuss actions. That's our next step, is it not?
That just feels like a little bit of a happy accident, though. So I still go back, though, to, what's the penalty if we default?
We were kind of backed into this considering they didn't respond to the city for 15 days, correct? As of the beginning of May, they kind of pushed us here.
They waited to the last minute to tell us. Is that
But it's
correct?
not the county that gets the money, is it? Is it who gets the money? Or whoever holds the debt, right? The county
We'd
is
be paying a bond. We'd be paying debt service on the bond.
on the bond, and therefore, if we default on one of our bonds, that isn't a good thing for the city, and I'm sure it will cost us a lot more. And the county they don't have any skin in this game. They made an agreement with us. We agreed. That's why it's an agreement. And now, lo and behold, they're saying, here you guys, we're stuck. So the only thing I think we can do is negotiate with the county and try to move them out.
Well, it doesn't sound like they're negotiating.
Well, no, that's why we're supposed to go into closed session to talk about how we might be able to negotiate.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Before we do that, I still have a few more questions, though,
Okay.
if I may. So again, do we have an answer in terms of what happens if we default?
I don't have the answer for that. It would be, I think we would want to pay the debt service because I think there's a very good chance it would go up on our Moody's rating as a late payment. So I think we would want to make a payment on June 1st. Whether or not there's an opportunity where we would pay it through several different funding sources and then continue to work after the fact to see if we get some of that money reimbursed through some of the room tax stabilization fund.
Okay, so we're basically making this payment, though, directly to the bond issuer.
Correct. It's completely the bond issuer. It is. That's why we have a paying agent, and he pays it directly through using room tax money and pays it pays the debt service to the bond issuer. Yes.
Okay, so when there is funding in the room tax stabilization fund, does that make the payment?
Yes. Our paying agent just takes it from that service payment. Yes.
Okay, and so and that would normally be the case then with K2, which has a position above K1, correct?
No, K1, we call the original K1, the original convention center and RESH are what they call priority number 1. Once they have enough to pay that debt service, then it's supposed to fall into anything left over goes into a stabilization fund. Then when that 2, which we call, or 2 is, which is the expansion that started in 2013, now that debt service should be then paid with the money left over in this room tax stabilization fund. When that's paid in full as the expo hall, then if there's money left over, then that rolls into the expo hall.
So does that stabilization fund get replenished every month as sales tax money is received?
It does on an annual basis. It makes sure that once all the debt payment is made, anything left over, it goes into the stabilization fund. So at the beginning of a room tax year, June 1st is when the year starts over July 1st. So as room tax starts coming in, it starts collecting enough money to pay all the debt service for the RESH and KI. So in many cases, by 6 months, there's enough in that fund to make sure that all the money has been set aside for that debt service. Then it rolls into the stabilization fund, and then it starts, and then when it's, every year it refills up. That's why they call it kind of the bucket and the waterfall. It fills up all the buckets for the first two priority one debt service, and then it'll roll into the next debt service as there's enough money.
Can that stabilization fund have a deficit?
There are two reserves within it. There is a $2.8 million reserve in case there's a shortfall on the KI1 and the RESH Center. And then there's another $2.2 million reserve to make the payments for June. Some of that $5 million of the reserves. So there is almost $5 million in this fund. It is up to the discretion of the county if they want to use those reserve funds.
So they are choosing not to exercise discretion to tap into that reserve fund to make the payment that is now due.
Correct.
I'm going to look at Attorney Chavez. Is that how you also interpreted it?
They are not obligated to do so, and it does not appear that they are doing so.
Has the conversation with the county executive about this? We keep talking about this improved relationship, but is that a conversation that's happening?
The county exec has been involved in conversations, yes.
So they're worried that they're not going to have enough for their December payment. So that's why they don't want to pay our June payment. That really, that's why I think we go back to the county and we go back to the.
All right.
How much are we talking here? What's the exact number?
Okay, the amount that the city is on the hook for is for the June 1st payment is $732,888.75. So what our potential recommendation is, if the county does not want to pay for, not allow the money to come from the room tax stabilization fund, as Attorney Chavez says, there is a $500,000 one-time use reserve for this fund. With interest, we're right around $520,000. That would put us at about $212,000 remaining. We do have other funding sources we could pull. There is some money left over from a bond account. So there are other places that we could make our debt service, things that we're trying to negotiate where we would get this money from if we're not allowed to use the room tax stabilization fund.
Are there
Can
any
we
other
ever get the money
bonds?
back? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alder Johnson.
Are there any other bonds within that waterfall that are being impacted by this, meaning other villages, towns, municipalities that have a payment, or is Green Bay the only one that is being asked to bear the brunt of this?
Sure, of course it's Green Bay.
We are.
It is only Green Bay. Yep, the first two are Green Bay and Ashwaubenon RESH Center, and then the second one is our KI Convention Center expansion.
Okay.
Later in the waterfall, if there was more money, then it would be the expo hall.
Could we get the money back if things really started going well? Or once we paid it, they don't give it back to us?
So that is what we were trying to address in the negotiations we've had with the county, essentially. So the way the stabilization fund works is all of the room tax that comes in is placed in that, and all of the funds that are placed in the room tax stabilization are pledged to the county. We no longer have a claim to them. So it's at the county's discretion as to whether or not we would be able to essentially get that money back. They're going to treat it like a loan to the stabilization fund or something to that effect. Don't have control of any of those funds anymore.
Right. I just want to step in. Yep. Because those are the agreements that were approved on August of 17. Correct. As Alderdorf had mentioned, those agreements came through council, finance and council, and they were approved in August of 17.
All right. So I just want to make sure I've got this timeline right. The county controls all this room tax money. They're looking at payments. We realize we might be short, but we're not sure if we're going to be short. The county realizes they're going to be short, and so they start hanging on to the money. Okay, if I got it right so far? And they tell us, hey, we can't give you enough money to cover the $732,000. You guys are on your own. And they tell us that when?
Just the 11th, right? You just said that.
May 11th, they told us?
I think May 5th is when I got the phone call.
May 5th. So May 5th, they tell us, sorry, suckers, you guys are on your own.
They
Okay?
didn't call anybody suckers.
Well, that's how I'm starting to feel here. And then they say on top of it, we're going to hang on to extra money because we're not sure we're going to make our be able to make our own next payment, right? Is that correct too? They have money to give us, but they're hanging on to it in case they need it. Is that correct?
In December, which is so far away.
So for something that's 7 months away, 8 months away,
Right.
they're not sure there's going to be enough money, so they're telling us you're on the hook for that too. Is that correct?
Yes, I just want one clarification. Yes, in the agreements that we all signed, that are signed, they do consider them priority number one, and a debt service year is June 1st and a December 1st payment. So that is why they're holding on. They're saying that's priority number one, has to be paid first. So they're holding on enough money to make sure that the June 1st and the December 1st payment is available for it before we go to priority number two, which is your KI convention expansion. And a payment which is due also June 1st, but again, we're priority two, so they're making sure they have enough for priority one first. And so I will confirm that is the whole time we were watching, forecasting, trying to make sure that there's money for our 6/1 payment. I never interpreted that a priority one second payment of December went of a June 1st payment of a priority two. I didn't realize the differences. So again, we've been watching, we've been forecasting. That information came to us again in the May time period, end of April, beginning of May.
Sure.
And
So
that's
instead
their
of-
choice. They could give us the money.
Right, they could give us the money. So instead of being a buddy and all working our problems out together, they're taking care of themselves first and they're letting us dangle. And then on top of it, there's a $5 million reserve fund split into two different funds that they could tap into, but they've chosen not to. Is that also accurate?
They will be tapping some of it, but yes, they're not tapping all of it, correct?
They're tapping it to help us out?
No.
Oh, they're tapping it to help themselves out, but they won't tap it to help us out. Is that correct?
It's tapping to affect priority number one, correct?
Oh, well, okay, we know who number one is now. All right, thank you.
I do believe that is the interpretation, that is how the documents were, that information is in our documents about the priority one and some, I mean, that is their interpretation on the agreements that were signed in 2017.
Alder Lefebvre.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm a county supervisor, but because I'm in Green Bay, I don't know. Well, it has never come up. I know at the counties down and everything and that they're fine, but they never mentioned anything about Green Bay's debt coming up and that there's going to be a problem. I didn't know anything of this. This is the first that I'm hearing it. So they haven't really, the county board hasn't talked about it, or, administration hasn't told any of us on the county board that Green Bay's debt, is going to have a problem with her KI2.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Yes, Diana.
Again, this was also being tracked and watched in the Room Tax Commission meetings. So in November, it was discussed, looked like we were fine. In the January meeting, they said that it looked like we were going to be fine for the June payment. So it was not discussed at the April Room Tax Commission meeting. So there was no concern yet in April. Again, we've been watching it. We've been concerned about watching it, knowing we were going to get through probably the June 1st payment. And then we were hoping if things bounce back in the summer, the Room Tax Stabilization Fund will start building back up, and then we would not have a concern for December, or we would have been knowing that we had time to come bring it to committee. Things did change, really in the end of April, beginning of May, and so we've been trying to work through that.
Can I ask, when you say how things changed, I mean, were more hotel rooms being used before then? Or, I mean, how is it things changed? I mean, no one's been using hotel rooms, as far as I know, all along for the last year. Or the things changed because the county decided to keep the money for December? Is that how things changed?
That's what it sounds like to me, Alder Galvin. So I think we know what the problem is now. So, and I don't think we're going to change it by talking more and more about what happened and what is happening. The only thing we could do now, I think, is deal with it and take some action. And we maybe can only do that in closed session.
Yeah, and Alderdorf, if I may, I'm okay with
Yes.
that, but admittedly, I'm not sure that I'm entirely clear on the dollar figure that's at stake here. The 732,000 was brought up. You mentioned there's 500 you can use. So really what you're asking for is $232,000 that needs to come from somewhere. The city needs to foot the bill. Wording source
Yes.
for that, right? And so can you just once again walk me through so I fully understand, where is that other 500,000 coming from?
In the agreements that were signed in August of 2017, there was, the city continued to ask for more money, a bigger piece of a cut. And at some point during the negotiations, the county put to the side $500,000 reserve for the KI2 expansion, if and when there was ever a shortfall. They set this money aside in case we needed it. And so that reserve is sitting at Associated Bank, which is our paying agent, and it's sitting there. And now since then it has accrued some interest, where we're sitting at about $519,000 that we would be able to tap. I have confirmed again today that we are able to, and how much the money is. County is saying they're willing to allow us to use that to make this debt service. So that was set aside back in the 2017 agreements.
So that 500,000 is for the entire tenure of the agreement, meaning that if we ever experience another shortfall before this agreement terminates, we're on our own to cover the entire shortfall.
Yes.
I mean, that's substantial risk.
I mean, and that shortfall could be as soon as this December, correct?
Yep.
Correct.
What a deal.
Okay.
Okay, so do we understand now enough about what's going on that we can now move into thinking about what acting?
Yeah, I would move that we go into closed session to discuss
I'll second that.
negotiations.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor of going into closed session?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And would you please read the verbiage?
Sure.
Alder Johnson.
I'm just looking for it. Here we go. Consideration with possible action on the room tax. No, that's not it.
No, the committee may convene.
Yeah, the committee may convene in closed session pursuant to section 19.85, subsection 1, subsection E, Wisconsin statute, for purposes of deliberating or negotiating sale of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business is necessary for competitive bargaining reasons. The committee will thereafter reconvene in open session pursuant to section 19.85, subsection 2, Wisconsin statutes, to take action on items discussed in closed session, if appropriate, and to consider the remainder of the agenda.
Were we supposed to vote now?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion to go back into open session
Motion to go in open session.
by Alder Corpus Dax,
Second.
second by Alder Johnson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. We're back in open session. I will entertain a motion as to what.
I would move that we authorize staff to use the K2 reserve fund and proceed as directed to continue negotiations with the county.
Very good. Is there a second? Second
Second.
by Alder Corpus Dax. Any further discussion?
I just want to make one comment.
Yes, Alder Johnson.
So I understand that, we're within obviously our, within the proper procedure to be able to take an action on this item. But I also want to say that I think that this is a very dangerous precedent to have, committees who just, again, accidentally happen to have enough people there take actions that the full city council should be debating. But at the same time, Unfortunately, our backs are up against the wall on this one, and I think it's incredibly unfortunate that we're even in this position. And I really hope that staff can have some productive conversations with the county to figure out how we can improve that particular relationship moving forward, because I think it's imperative for both of our governments that we be able to do this in a time frame that's reasonable and appropriate. So I hope, again, that we don't have to find ourselves in a position where we're making these kind of decisions with 7 members of council and not the full council.
Okay, thank you for saying that. Yes, Alder Gerlach.
Just wanted to make sure that I understand that in light of the very short time frame we're dealing with here, those of us who are not serving on the committee may vote on this.
So what we are doing is we are asking for the committee to give us direction. And this meeting, so every time we have a quorum or are likely to have a quorum, we advertise that it is also considered a quorum of the council. And so with that, because of the time frame, we will be seeking to ratify the actions of this committee, because we're going to move forward in reliance on those, assuming that all 7 of you are in agreement.
So they aren't actually voting tonight, but they will vote on June 1st? Or they will indicate that they're in agreement with what we discussed in closed session?
Correct.
Okay, so I'll ask each one individually. Would that be helpful to record that?
Sure.
Okay, Alder. Yes.
Yes. So Vanessa, if we didn't have a quorum here today, we would have to have a special session of
Yes.
the council to do this?
Yes.
So we're just lucky to be here.
Yes.
Okay, so because of the whole timeline with how the county waited to the last minute to tell us, we've been painted into this corner, so to speak.
By
Correct.
the county. Yes.
And
by
again,
the
we'll be treating it as ratification. And so this will still be coming in front of the council. It's just that we'll be seeking ratification because we are going to move forward in reliance on this.
All right, thank you very much.
Alder Stoyer, do you agree with what we discussed in closed session?
Yep. Yes, I do.
Alder Gerlach, do you agree with what we discussed in closed session? Okay, Alder Lefebvre, do you agree with what we discussed in closed session?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and the rest of us can vote. Okay, we'll now vote on the motion made by Alder Johnson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries unanimously by committee and with the approval of 3 alders that were also present. All right, let us move on to an update on the American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you. There has been hours and hours and hours of time spent on reading these, the interim ruling. There has been a lot of time spent by our attorney, we've said in many hours of webinars. So we have a lot of information on it, but what I want to give you at a very, very high level is the interim rule that came out in May 10th is still interim. They are allowing comments until the middle of July, and they still will be making changes to what we can and can't use this money for.
Wow.
The city did receive our half of our funds. We've received $11,847,758 on May 17th. So we have the money as suggested by all the experts. That money has been brought in. We opened a separate bank account. It is put in a separate fund so that it is very transparent to make sure it doesn't affect our general levy, any other expenditure restraint and general levy limits. So we've been following all the recommendations from our experts. We're still they're still trying to determine how we calculate lost revenue. It has to be done at entity-wide, so you can't just pick all the items that lost revenue. They have to take the ones that went high and low, and you have to do it at an entity level. So we are working through that calculation. Lost revenue cannot just be put into reserve fund. It can be used for infrastructure or for future government services. So even like a parking utility who lost a lot of money, we can calculate how much was lost, but we can't turn around and just rebuild their fund balance. You can calculate it, but it has to be used for current services. So that is another assumption we did not know that was gonna happen until about 2 weeks ago. So my recommendation at this moment is, because this is not final, that I do not recommend using any American Rescue Plan Act money to take anything off the capital improvement list at this point, because nothing is final. We have no final guidance. Certainly, we have a very good draft, but no final guidance. We have over 3 years to use this funds. And of course, there was a recommendation that, and the mayor had suggested, and we had told the council that at some point we will bring a recommendation to the council on how we're going to spend this money. So I'd hate to start allocating money of some of this funds before we even bring it back to committee, how we're going to take this money and what big buckets we're going to try to allocate and spend this money in. So lots of detail. I could talk for hours on what I've heard, but at this point, I don't think, because we're going to come back and bring you a lot more information when we try to give you some recommendations on how we want to try to spend it potentially in August, that I recommend we just not plan to use any money for this year's CIP.
And I had come to that conclusion after I read through everything and then looked at the CIP, and that's why I reached out and contacted you earlier today. So I think that's a good plan. What do the rest of the alders think?
So,
Alder Johnson.
thank you, Alder Groff. The one thing that I wanted to be sure of when I first placed this item on the agenda was it a month ago now? I wanted to make sure that before staff comes forward with, here's all the things that we'd like to spend it on, that there's an opportunity for public input in this process. So where are we at with determining what that public input process will look like?
Well, I mean, we don't even have the guidance yet.
And I understand, but I think we can start talking about like how the format might look. Because what I don't want to see is that in August we come back here, here's all the things we're going to spend it on, and now the public's cut out of the dialogue.
Right.
Alder Johnson, I do apologize. I wasn't really bringing your communication into consideration. I kind of forgot about it. Certainly, the mayor has talked very much about getting public input. And so I just don't have a timeline on that right now, what his recommendation was. But that certainly has been a very big consideration. We start with some kind of draft and then take it out to the public to get input. I just don't have that timeline at this point. So I really was just trying to answer whether or not we would try to use it for the CIP tonight. And so that, unfortunately, I did not actually bring your communication back and really give you the answer you're looking for yet.
No, and that's okay, and I appreciate that. And I think it was obviously very important for us to hear your perspective on its impact on the CIP. But again, I still think it's important, whether you just take it back voluntarily after hearing the dialogue here, taking that back to the mayor's office. But I think it's important that we find a way for the public really to be engaged on this on the front end and not the back end. So, would it be your expectation that when staff comes forward in August with these are the things we want to spend it on, that we are taking an action at that time to approve authorizing funds to be used in that manner? Or do you anticipate this just being, here's a list, chew on it, and we'll come back to you in a little while?
I think the expectation may have been that in August we would take an action, which would mean we have to have a lot more information done, completed up front if we were to take an action on that list. So let me find out some more information and get back to you on expectations and about the community input on the front end instead of after the fact.
In order for the community to have input, they have to have a clear understanding of all the restrictions, because there's so many. Good with that. There are so many restrictions. So I think that it would be good to have some kind of presentation that it could even be videoed on what exactly the limitations are, so that we don't get a lot of ideas that we couldn't possibly use because they wouldn't be allowed. So that's going to take a little time to do that. But probably by mid-July, you think we'll have more of the rules? You said mid-July?
They said that the federal treasury is allowing comments for and feedback up until July 16th. So that is as much information we have at this point, which I would assume then it's going to take some time for them to put the final guidance out. So I'm assuming toward the end of July. I haven't heard an actual date on the new guidance or final guidance coming out, but I would expect late in July.
Do you think that what they have so far they're going to use that as a basis, or might they change that?
I'm sure it's going to be a basis, but I mean, I really can't answer that. But I mean, that is what I'm hearing in all the webinars that we're sitting in, that they're giving they're looking for feedback, and then they will and can could tweak or change something in the guidance based on feedback that they've received.
So Alder Johnson, are you thinking about a big group of people in a room with individual focus groups, and they get an overall presentation on this is what we can use the funding for, looking at here are all the guidelines, talk in your small groups about what you might like to see it used for? What kind of public input, how do we get information out?
Yeah, I think the intent was that based on our dialogue on this issue last time, is that staff would come back with or I think it might have even been referred to the mayor's office, I think, to come back to us and tell us how they would conduct that. I think back to shipyard, the amount of public input that we did with the shipyard on a $10 million investment, I sure hope that we're not going to skate over 25 million, right? And not have an equally robust opportunity for the public to provide input. So, I mean,
okay, so you're going to let the mayor's office come back with.
Yeah, I thought that was how we worded that motion. I
that's-
just can't recall.
I think
But
you're right.
again, not necessarily to come back and say, we're going to do it on this date and blah, blah, but hey, generally speaking, we think this would be the best format.
Okay.
You know, and you know, like to your point, right? We can do an overview. Maybe it's a workshop, maybe it's not, maybe it's just a listening session, but at least giving us some guidance on the most useful way to receive that feedback from the public.
Right. So by June 22nd, by our next meeting, that's when we'd like to have that information. Well,
Yes.
okay. All right. So,
Laura?
yes, Alder, sir.
Just a quick question. Some of it's been answered probably already. We have three years to spend this money, correct? Sounds like we have a 3-year window.
Maybe even longer.
You by 12/31 of 24, it needs to be spent or obligated. So anything that's a bigger infrastructure project like a sewer, water, or a broadband project, as long as it's obligated, meeting all their criteria, potentially that project could end of 2026, but the money has to be obligated and be able to be noted. But otherwise, and any other expenditures has to be completed by the end of 24.
Okay, then one other quick question. As far as earmarking these funds, is there like a final tight date for that, or is this going to be all open to discussion and meetings and all that kind of stuff?
Open for discussion.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
All right. So do we need to take some action on this? Let's see. Was it an action item?
I think it's just a motion to receive and place on file.
It's an update. Okay. But we just wanted to come back again on June 22nd. So, all right, motion to receive and place on file by Alder Johnson. Is there a second? Second by Alder second by Alder Galvin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now we are on to the big discussion of the night, the man we've all been waiting for. After Diana is Steve Grenier. Go ahead. Director Ellenbecker, you can structure this how you want.
So I do want to thank the directors that have stayed online for this meeting. One did not think it would go this long. What we have done, we've gone through quite a few of the departments. In this case, we have now left the Director of Public Works areas left to look through. In the past, historically, we've been looking at 2021 borrows, a request looking at 2022, knowing that we are going to be right around the corner. We're going to be looking at 22 column for the budget purposes. So the way we've done it, Director Grenier, in the past, we've just been running through. You kind of talk through your items. Director Manley has been putting it up on the screen so they can kind of follow along in the packet. So you can talk through your items, breeze over some that are maybe a more routine, or give a much shorter description. And then after Director Grenier is done, I guess I would like to summarize. At this point, Grenier is going to be talking about the expense side of it, and then I'll talk about funding after Director Grenier has gone through his items. At this point, this screen is just saying on a very, very high level, DPW is requesting about $11 million. These are expenditures, about $11.3 million in major projects, about $224,000 in equipment, and fleet of $1,021,000, about a $12.4 million expense side. That does not take in any other funding sources at this time. That doesn't mean we're borrowing $12.5 million. There are several other funding sources that either wheel tax, road improvement programs, there are carryover fund balances and other budgeted, some of these items are budgeted. So we will talk to those details after Director Grenier has gone through his items.
Director Grenier.
Pam, if you want, Pam will probably jump down now to Department of Public Works. If we want, Director, we could probably go through, if you want to go through column 21 and 22 at the same time, or maybe or 21 and then just touch on 22 if there's something that you want to highlight.
Well, given the sheer volume of projects that we have, especially in the capital stack, I don't know that it's necessary to go through line by line unless there are specific questions that members of the committee have, especially if you've had this document for some period of time. I would hope that there would have been at least a cursory review on some of it, but this is the same information that we normally, historically, have brought through the Improvement and Services Committee. So preparation of a budget or a capital improvement program like this is certainly nothing that's strange, foreign, or odd for us. So again, starting off at the top here with the annual bridge inspections, that's a normal annual project. Once every 5 years, that value goes up quite a bit because there's additional different types of inspections that are required on a 5-year cycle. So we do try to balance that out a little bit, but going into, some of the Atkinson Bridge project, Chantal Bridge, the design is phased in over 2 years under contract with Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Again, we've got this citywide monument, survey monuments. This is an initiative that we are putting together to provide a backbone across the city of high accuracy monumentation that's used not only by city staff, but also developers, so that we're on a common vertical datum, so that we're all working off the same vertical point. One of the things we have been finding is because we have a disjointed, non-consistent vertical datum across the city, we are starting to run into problems where we wind up with sewers that are in conflict with each other. So this is one of the things we're looking at doing to reconcile that. If you want to come down somewhat, Pam. Okay, Country Club Road, again, we're in design there. A project that's largely being funded by Wisconsin Department of Transportation, similar to the way that Mather Street, Delp Avenue, Webster Avenue, all were being done. We're starting to get into some of the equipment activities here with next year coming. If again, we've got some of these road projects here that for 2022, getting back into this year, $450,000 to replace the damaged, destroyed boat launch facility up at Metro and do some paving work up there. $650,000, that's our general annual program that goes into resurfacing. $30,000 in general bridge maintenance. We've got a project that's under construction right now on Gray. That's the 795 you're looking at. Again, Harvey Street, Howard Avenue, Jackson Street reconstruction. Those are all projects, just infrastructure projects that we either have under construction or are planned for next year. The Larson Road Bridge design, again, being done collaboratively through WISDOT, so we split that cost over the 3-year design period. We have some center locks on the Main Street Bridge that do need to be replaced. The one project that was in last year that was taken out that's back in again this year that we've placed back in is the $2 million for the hydraulic replacement. We told you last year, we don't know when it's going to fail. It may last for another 5 years. It may last for another 10 years. It may fail the next time somebody hits the switch. We really don't know. Again, we put that back in. That's committee and council's decision whether they want to keep that in. There's $150,000 in there yet for some additional design work because there's always something that pops up. Well, that's actually Monroe over the East River. So 40,000 there. Oakland Street, we're looking at a reconstruct there next year. Resurfacing program averages about $2.6 million a year. So we just put that in there as an annual. There's no inflation on that yet. We'll revise that number on an annual basis as necessary. We're planning on doing a reconstruct on Roosevelt Street next year. We've got one going on South Maple this year. Another reconstruct on both South Van Buren and School Place next year. Citywide sidewalks program. We are budgeting about $320,000 a year. That's the new program that came through at the request of Alder Galvin, where we are proactively looking at sidewalks across the city on a sequential basis. That did not replace the program where sidewalks are being turned in on complaint. And that complaint program is still as robust as ever. So, again, we're looking at about 3 times the size of program that we've had in prior years. We got a bridge on Taylor Street that's going to need to be constructed next year, finishing off the design this year. Every year we've got $500,000 in there for traffic signal repairs. We got some design on a Beaver Dam Creek. That's largely being funded by WISTOT. Then we start getting into some repairs and upgrades that are necessary over at our west side garage with the roof and parapet cap replacement on various buildings, some trench drain and HVAC improvements, and some repairs to the work in Building H and in the gym wall. You want to keep coming. We did have an HVAC system replacement at the West Side shop, and we're electing to kind of roll the dice a little bit on that this year, and not fund that. We're going to push that off to a subsequent year. So grand total on major capital, we're looking at about $11.3 million.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Alder Dorf. Steve, I know this is the item that you keep getting beat over the head with, but obviously roads. It's great to see the breakout of, we'll call them anticipated reconstruction projects, recognizing and acknowledging that those can obviously change. But when we look at resurfacing in particular, how does that 2.6 million compare to what we've done in previous years?
That 2.6 is anticipated to hold the line at the current, what we're currently last year and this year doing.
Okay. I mean, and if you were to, again, just acknowledging, right, that sometimes reconstruction is necessary. There's other utility work going on, and it makes more financial sense for us to wait a couple years rather than resurfacing and tearing it up in 5 years, right? I mean, so when you start to think about the amount of roadway in the city of Green Bay that requires resurfacing, and I know you may not have that number, off the top of your head, but I mean, how much resurfacing is actually is needed in the city if you had a magic wand and could, money, contractors, all that stuff wasn't a concern. And what I'm ultimately trying to get at is this enough money for us to keep pace with what's really needed for resurfacing?
Depends on how you define what's really needed.
Well, I think the community's made that very clear that our roads are in terrible condition and we'd like to see better roads. So what does that mean? I don't know. It's a rather subjective assessment, but I think people want to see more.
Well, and we've had that discussion at INS. We're going to be holding that discussion again tomorrow night at INS. We are currently maxed out. I don't have enough staff to do any additional work, and we decided to use administration fee to set the bar, and that's where the bar is currently set.
So if we're not,
There's a desire to continue to ratchet that bar up. It's going to take more staff and a whole lot more money.
well, that's the question we're trying to answer, right? So if the bar is at a level that's not, I mean, that's not meeting the needs of the community, I don't think we ought to just settle for that bar then. So that's what I'm trying to really figure out, is wrap my arm around what is, what do you have the capacity for? And if we're going to ratchet that up, I mean, what roadways, I mean, do we actually have those identified in terms of which ones would require resurface reconstruction, and could we do more if you had the resources?
Absolutely. We've got a 5-year plan identified here already to take and compress the time on that to add more lineal footage in any 1 year is actually easy. Getting the resources to do that work and getting the funding to do not only the road work, but also the underground infrastructure,
Right.
realizing that there's 3 additional funding sources that we can't without significant peril, or the council is going to have to make a decision that they want me to resurface and or reconstruct streets over aging infrastructure that will not last as long as the street we're putting over it.
I think, Alder Johnson, I think it's always important that it's not just a Director Grenier discussion here, because we have to stormwater and sewer are such an integral part of this. So it's not just up to Director Grenier.
Correct. And I understand that, but correct me if I'm wrong. Resurfacing is that budget just for, we'll call it a new layer of blacktop? Or, I mean, that doesn't actually include reconstruction, does it? In which case, then the other utilities, do they apply to that particular line item?
They do when we get to sanitary and storm. There are corresponding line items within the sanitary and storm account that apply to the utility upgrades necessary for the resurfacing program. And water utility likewise has water main relays, and they have a financial limit that they can go up to, because in order for them to pay for that, they're going to have to raise their water rates, and their water rate increases are limited by what the PSC will allow them to do.
Okay, so you said this is an item, because I really want to make sure that we're focusing on the financial aspect of it here. But you said that INS is taking this issue up again tomorrow night. I haven't seen the agenda yet.
They are, I've seen the agenda.
Okay.
And it's on there.
I'll let them, peel back into the layers of, reconstruction, utilities, all that other stuff. But I'm really coming at this from the perspective of, if we want to resurface more roads and we need more money, I mean, that this is the appropriate place to have that conversation. So I'm going to let them maybe go through what they've got to go through tomorrow night, and perhaps that the money discussion will follow then when we formally adopt the entire CIP.
And realizing that we will be cutting from the CIP, because everything that's being
I recognize that,
asked
but it's
for.
about prioritizing.
Right. Okay.
I don't know about you, but I hear roads. So that's a priority to me.
Okay. Any further discussion? Alder, actually, I can't see everyone, but so if someone is waving out there, I see Alder LaFave. Go ahead.
Yeah. I got a question on Webster Street from Main to Mason Street. I know that would go to the state for a good portion of it. Am I right?
No.
No?
Okay, where does it go?
Webster is 100% a local project. The reason that we were able to apply for local road funding through the STBG program for the portion between University Avenue and Radisson Street.
Okay.
But there are certain restrictions on those funds. It has to pay for no less than 50 and no more than 85% of the cost of the pavement construction. Given the cost of that Webster project that we just completed, there wasn't enough money available to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, at the county level to fund that project adequately. When Brown County moved from a small MPO to an entitlement MPO several years ago, when the county population exceeded 220,000, that's when we had a one-time influx of about $5 million that was available for projects. And the MPO agreed unanimously that Webster Avenue was one of the worst arterials in the area. So they agreed to dedicate all that money. $4.9 million went to Webster and nowhere else.
Okay.
Being able to wrangle that kind of money out of the MPO for another section of Webster is going to be challenging. And again, you know, we take a look at every 2 years in odd number years. So again, this year we'll be doing the road ratings. The road ratings on the section of Webster south of Main are not bad enough to warrant us looking at that for reconstruction yet.
Right, not yet, but I don't know, 5 years from now, with the amount of traffic, and I travel that quite a bit because I could take Mason Street over the bridge over to the west side. So in 5 years, it's probably going to be in pretty bad shape.
Well,
We'll have to take it up then.
I don't know about that because that entire section is concrete, and concrete being an ultimate strength, it's not like asphalt. Asphalt wears down over time, whereas concrete, it either fails or it doesn't.
Yeah.
But we're not, if we're talking, I don't really want to focus on something.
No. I just want to know where it is on the schedule, kind of what they're looking at. So,
Okay.
Because I know that's going to be a big one. Yeah.
Okay. Other comments?
And one other thing too, I noticed
Sure,
that it looks like a lot of the streets are kind of on the west side. Am I right in that assessment?
I noticed some on the east side.
Couple.
Right.
Of course, it goes by, right. They're rating.
They're rated, right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a process.
Alder LaFrey brings up a legitimate question, and that's something we would welcome some discussion back from the council on then. Do you want us to do an equitable distribution, or do you want us to fix the roads that we think need to be fixed?
No, it goes by the rating. I understand that.
It goes by the rating.
Yeah.
I think it does.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a comment if there are no other Alder comments. My comment is part of the reason the roads in the city are so bad has nothing to do with city council or DPW. It has to do with the way things were decided in the past years. And that is that the people in the neighborhoods got to decide whether they wanted their road fixed or not. And because so many times they chose to not have the roads fixed, and their alders at that time supported that decision, there was much wasted by Director Grenier and his whole department doing engineering studies, preparing to get roads fixed, and then either the alders or the citizens with their postcard surveys would say, no, thank you. And now we are in crisis mode, and thank goodness we have so that now when DPW does an engineering study and says, these are the roads we'd like to fix, they're going to get fixed. But the citizens of the city have to take some responsibility on themselves for the decisions and choices they made in the past. And now we have to try to catch up. So I really felt that I needed to say that in defense of DPW, in defense of city council, citizens made their choices, and that's why we're in a hole. And now we need to catch up. Any other comments? Anybody else? Okay, Director Grenier.
Okay, now we are on to the equipment section.
Okay.
So again, pretty small in number of items. Next year, we're looking at the asphalt reclaim box, that's what we use for patching. That's the hot box that's used for asphalt patching for filling potholes. We got a brush chipper that's on its last legs, needing to be replaced next year. This year, it's been some period of time prior to my being, definitely prior to my being with the acting as director, and very well maybe prior to my involvement with the city, since we last upgraded or did some replacement on the mechanics toolboxes, and those things get used all day, every day, 2 shifts a day. So about $7,400. If you've priced toolboxes lately, $7,400 doesn't get you real far. So we've got a, so I'm going to skip the sidewalk tractor and the tractors down below. We're going to talk simply about replacing a V-box. That's a salter that fits in the back of one of the dump trucks for salting during the winter. There's some traffic analysis software that Dave Hansen and Tom Shermans have requested. A traffic control trailer, so that holds some items that are necessary when taking. That's the trailer that the barricades and traffic cones and that kind of stuff. When traffic division is out setting up a detour or putting up barricades, that's the trailer that they utilize for that. And then mechanics need a new ODB reader. That's the thing that plugs into your dashboard and tells you what the error codes are in your car. We utilize something similar to that. The sidewalk tractors that are shown for the next 3 years, 22, 23, 24, the 4x4 tractor with the bucket and flail mower, and the box pushers. Normally there's a little bit of interplay between this and the fleet as to where those are located. Historically, all of the items in this category and in the green fleet category that we're going to next, if you look at the combined numbers, it's in the neighborhood of about $1.2 million. Historically, that has been funded out of our budget. But starting about 3 or 4 years ago, in order to get down to both expenditure restraint and to get the budget down to a level that the council could approve, our equipment and fleet has been removed from the budget, instead put the bonding. So it's our stated goal to get this stuff back into our budget and not bond for it. So we can either talk about these items now, or we can continue on to fleet and then have a larger discussion regarding all these things wrapped up at once.
What is the wish of the committee? I think we can talk about it all at once. Is that okay with you guys? I can see Alder Galvin, he shrugged. Alder Johnson? He doesn't care. But I can't see anybody else. I can't see Alder Corbus-Dax. Shoot.
All at once is fine.
Okay, all at once is fine.
Okay, Pam, can you go forward to our fleet then? Okay, so with our heavy equipment, we rolled that largely, with the and that's probably why, is this is our heavy equipment, whereas tractors are light equipment. Many, many years ago, when Carl Weber was director here, DPW developed a scoring matrix where the equipment was given a numerical score, and when it fell to a certain level, it was due for replacement. We've sort of adapted that over the last couple of years and come up with a number of hours or number of years of use on equipment, at which time it becomes eligible for replacement. But any of the equipment or fleet that we're talking about, especially as it relates to trucks or heavy equipment, definitely has a long history of analysis before we request replacement. Every year we are looking at replacement of 2 garbage trucks. Those things are running just north of $300,000 a piece right now.
Director Grenier, can I ask a question about that? That's nothing. This is, you would still bond Or are you trying to get those put back into the,
Historically, $1.2 million of fleet and equipment replacement was in the budget.
okay, okay.
This was
Thank you.
all budgetary expense
And now it's bonding, okay.
before. So again, here in 21 and again in 22, we're showing 2 refuse trucks replaced. We have 16 frontline trucks. They have an 8-year lifespan. The math on that's pretty easy. We got to replace 2 a year. I will say last year we went without replacing them, so we're already behind. This year we have one of the front end loaders is in need of replacement. That's the loader with the plow, the wing, the grapple bucket. Those are used in the summertime, a lot of times out at the yard waste centers for helping to process the yard waste and move that kind of stuff around. And then in the winter, the bucket and grapple are dropped and they are utilized with a wing and a plow for plowing. Again, you can see there's a sidewalk tractor in here for next year. And that pretty much gets us through for the next 2 years. So again, taking a look both at what we had under equipment and what we had under fleet, that prior to going to this type of an analysis, we used to lump all that stuff together and it was all included in that approximate $1.2 million replacement plan that was under our budget.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on these 2 sections? No? You gave very complete information and good explanations. Thank you, Director Grenier. Is there anything else left you want to talk about?
Well, I know one of the things that was mentioned was that we were going to look at, and Pam has gone there now, sanitary, storm, and parking. Parking is a pretty short list, and it's completely financed by revenues within the parking department or parking division. So
Right there.
capital, that's all we really have is emergency repairs and parking ramp repairs. This year we're at 150, but historically we funded that combination at about 650,000. So we're at 700 for this year, but historically we funded that at about $650,000 combined. Heading off to their equipment, we've got 70,000 in there for license plate recognition equipment and $5,000 for a walk behind painter this year. The LPR equipment will be installed with the enforcement attendants, and what it will be able to do, we're not allowed to chalk tires. Or there's some debate relative to the legality and constitutionality of chalking tires. And chalking tires is a practice that is as old as parking utilities that has been used to determine whether or not a vehicle has exceeded 2-hour parking or time-limited parking. So instead, what we're looking at is purchasing software it ties in with a GPS unit, so it knows geographically where it is, and it scans the license plate. So as we come down XYZ street, that may not be, so for instance, if we're enforcing on Broadway is unmetered, but has time-limited parking. We can drive down the street on Broadway, it'll recognize the license plates and determine whether or not that vehicle has been there exceeding the 2-hour time limit, and then notify the enforcement attendant that a citation for that vehicle should be issued. And then the walk behind painter, similar to what's used by operations division for doing various painting in parking facilities and things like that. It's a push type painter that paints parking lines or whatever pavement marking we need for parking division. And I don't believe we had anything in the parking division for fleet for this year. So
Thank you.
We got one enforcement vehicle. So that's the Jeeps that are used by the enforcement attendants. We have one that's at the end of its service life, so we're looking to replace that. So any questions on parking? again, the smallest of my divisions, so easiest to go through.
Okay. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Continue.
Okay, then Pam, if you want to go back up to either sanitary or storm and capital, major capital. Okay, sanitary. Starting off at the top, a lot of these projects on major capital mirror the road project that they go along with. So you will see 13th to 19th Hickory Hill. Now that's out a couple of years, but there's a pavement, there's a sanitary and a storm entry for each of those. They all tie together. It's part of the same reconstruct. So chronic sewer repairs citywide. We have either complaints that come in, backups, failures. We had a sanitary sewer failure in Main Street 2 years ago, between just west of Elizabeth Street. There was a 24-inch sanitary main that had a failure in it. If something like that pops up, this is what we use to fund those types of repairs. Again, we talked about the survey monument project under pavement, because those survey monuments are used for pavement projects, sanitary, and storm projects. Each of those three funding sources is splitting the cost of putting that loop in. East Shore Lift Station down here. So then we've got Eliza and Elmore next year, Finger Road reconstruction next year, Gray Street this year, Harvey next year, Howard next year, Jackson this year. Again, this all ties together with our reconstructs. As was discussed earlier, we're looking at $600,000 worth of upgrades to sanitary as part of our resurfacing program this year, and we're estimating at about $300,000. That might be hopeful. We'll see. Root treatment. What we have every year is street trees and things of that nature. They have a tendency to look for water and nutrients, both of which found in sanitary sewage. So the roots intrude into our sanitary system and start causing blockages and backups. So what we use is a chemical root treatment process. We spend about $70,000 a year on that. Again, as we come down into the Maple Van Buren school place, those tie back to the same pavement projects we talked about under pavement. Sewer repairs citywide, these are kind of just the things that pop up from time to time. So I take that back. The 600,000, or was that the number we had up there? 800,000. Every year we have a company that comes in, we have a contractor that comes in, and we televise a basin of sanitary sewer. So everything that drains to a low point and then drops into the GBMSD or new water sewers. As we're doing that televising, we are identifying pipes that are in need of repair. That's what that $800,000 program is for the chronic. The sewer repairs citywide, the 150 you're seeing here, are the breaks and the things that pop up that were unanticipated. TV inspection of sewers, again, you're seeing the 75,000. That's what we're paying the contractor to go around and take a look at our sanitary sewers. What we refer to as our basin televising. Then in the storm, very similar kind of an approach. Again, we've got the same pavement projects. $217,000 for the monuments. Again, that's being split three ways.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
What is a survey monument?
Survey monument is both a horizontal control, so you know relative to the county coordinate system what the physical location X and Y are. So it would be analogous to how your GIS system or GPS system, if you've got a dashboard type GPS or the GPS that's in your phone, it tells you where you are. That's the XY component of it. And then there's the Z component, or the vertical component, which is a benchmark loop. Those need to be higher accuracy than what we currently have. Some of our benchmark stuff goes back to the 50s.
Okay, thank you.
So now we start getting into some of the standalone projects. We're looking in the prep, coming out of the Preble study, some upsizing on Dan's and Farland for storm sewer, another $1 million this year into dike maintenance. Start getting into the Elmore projects. Again, those tie back to paving projects, Finger, Gray, Harvey. That's all part of our street reconstruct. Howard, Jackson. We do have a $2 million place marker in there for next year to hopefully come up with a solution for something in the Main Street. That's the main Mason corridor. Unfortunately for us, we need to get some rainfall to get some flow data to finish off the modeling down in Main and Mason. And it's actually been rather dry this year, so we haven't been able to collect some of the data. We need to finish off the analysis down there. But again, there's $100,000 this year on the design for that facility. Potentially $1.6 million in real estate acquisition. Now with some of the projects that are going in that area, that may or may not be necessary. Mini storm, citywide, we're spending about $650,000 on that and then capping the program off. $250,000 yet this year for Museum Place lift station. We're seeing an uptick in subdivisions. There are times where the city has to pay for upgrades within new subdivisions on sanitary and storm sewer. So we've got some money set aside for storm in there. Again, Oakland is a street reconstruct next year. We're spending about $900,000 a year to upgrade and maintain storm sewers with the resurfacing program. Roosevelt, Maple, South Van Buren, School Place, again, all just part of our reconstruct program. Sewer repairs citywide, there are $400,000 in there. Again, that's going around and doing some televising of the sewers, and when we find issues that need to be addressed, we've got that fund available to take care of that. We've got about $2.5 million set aside for a potential project, or we're looking to have that money put aside next year for a potential project at Seymour Park. Spend about $75,000 a year on vegetation maintenance at our existing stormwater ponds. Doesn't do us a whole lot of good to build a pond and let it just go wild, and the vegetation doesn't do the stormwater cleaning function that it was intended to. So we do spend that money on that. We do have a need. It's something we've been putting off for a couple of years, but DNR has told us that we need to get it done. When we have our street sweepers out, the sweepers utilize a certain amount of water to help suck up the dirt when they're doing the sweeping. And we need to separate that water and the solids that are in there, and we have to periodically landfill those solids. So we need to create some dewatering basins that DNR will approve of in order to create that separation of the solids and liquids. And then TV inspection of sewers, like I identified on the sanitary side. On the storm side, we likewise hire a consultant or a contractor to come in and do some TV inspection on our storm sewers to help supplement what we're able to do with our own staff. I don't think we had anything under equipment and fleet for either of the two utilities.
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, anyone have any comments, questions?
If not, one of the things that I will offer up to you, and I'm looking to Diana for a little bit of support here. As we were preparing not only the needs, but also the revenue end of things, we scrubbed every account we had. If there was a nickel to be found, we accounted for it. And as a result, we wound up trimming about $4 million, a little north of $4 million off of our ask. So we have really done everything that we could to deliver the program we told you we would, and not ask for money unless it was absolutely necessary.
Thank you.
I
We
concur with
appreciate
it.
that. You,
Yep, I can concur with the director. I think I've mentioned that in the last 2 meetings that, we've worked really hard to find other funding sources. So we can come back to Director Grenier if you have more questions, but I think what I would like to say at this point is, we've really gone through the needs, immediate needs for 2021 and looking at 2022. We certainly can make any changes to 2022 yet before we move forward with our budget later this year. If at this point, if there's any expenses that we've talked about in the last 3 weeks, you want to add more information on, you want to talk about, you want to consider whether or not you want to remove them, you want to change them, push them out. Now would be a time if you have any items that you want to really look at again. And then the next step I would do is I would talk about the funding sources, because I know the book is a little complicated or confusing. We have this large ask of, it's really $36 million is what we're looking at for 2021. But we have many different funding sources, and that does not mean we're borrowing 2021. We're not borrowing $36 million. This one is a little complicated, but as Director Manley is showing, even in the general levy portion, we have about $14 million of just in major projects. We have many different funding sources, and at this point, we'd be looking at borrowing about $8 million. I have another spreadsheet that I would actually probably like to show that would be a little clearer, but I guess before we go into that, do you want to talk about any other expenses, or do you want me to show you where we're at for borrowing request at a summary level, and then go back and see if there's any expenses you want to talk at a deeper level or recommend or suggest removing from this document?
I would think we need to see the funding, and that we need to see a bottom line of if we have to remove something rather than just going through it right now. So does the committee agree that you'd like to see what the funding sources are, what really the bottom line is, and then if we have to make cuts, what cuts do we, how much do we have to cut? Would that be a good way to go right now?
Sure.
Alder Corpus Stacks looks interested and is nodding her head. And I cannot any longer see Alder. Where did he go? Alder Johnson, where are you? There he is. He said yes. Okay. All right. Let's see that that spreadsheet you got for us, Director Ellenbecker.
Okay. And again, are you seeing my screen now? A different spreadsheet?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And again, there's a point at some point where I still want you to be looking at expenses, and if there's something you think that doesn't belong in there, whether we can afford it or not, of course there's that need of, maybe, it should come off. But I will tell you at a very high level, this will match up to your book. Your book was saying we have about $36 million worth of expenses for 2021. The reason why I have it broken out this way is this is your general levy. This will be supported by your levy, your tax dollars. Then we have a TIF. We have some borrowing for sanitary, parking, and storm, and those are paid through their own revenue sources. This column here, I'm just showing these are revenue sources that have been identified. IT had some money in their budget that took care of most of their requests. So these are capital items that have been that it's in the book, but they were included in our budget. We said found $12,000 that was a duplicate in the book, so we already have it in the budget. DPW, these are small items that are in the budget. They're specifically marked in the budget, and they're in this book, so that's a duplicate. So we can, I haven't had a chance to show Director Grenier, but I can show him that. Infrastructure, these are things like wheel tax and the LRIP, local road improvement program. Does that sound about right? And then we also had parks, also had some items that were either in a budget or there was grant funding or some other funding. So out of the 18 million that was requested, we have about $2.2 million, almost $2.3 million in these programs. There was some money, some vehicles in here that now are in the lease program, so I could take them off the list. We're not bonding for them. And this is where Director Grenier was saying that we found fund balances. We scraped every nickel and dime we could to find some money. IT had something that was and they're going to use something in their fund balance to pay for a $50,000 item. So when the day is over, we're not borrowing anything for IT. We found this is where Department of Public Works over time has had borrowed for different equipment and is currently has a positive fund balance in their equipment account. And we have actually changed that we count for that in the last year or two. So that, long story short, this is some money that was in a fund balance that will take care of some of the needs that he has asked for this year. And then in infrastructure, there is some different places where he has had money left over. I think one of them is the right away. He has some money left over in his pavement account. We have looked at anything that there was money that could be put toward this year's borrowing to reduce the amount of borrowing. That's another 4.9 million. That council committee recommendations, I would say at this point on the general levy, we're still looking at about $11.3 million of borrowing. We are paying off 7.5. That would say that we still have, there's a pretty big gap. We would be certainly borrowing more than we're paying off. There's a note down here. If enough park projects does get approved out of this 1.8 million, we would actually slide $750,000 of money that was already bonded for the Bay Beach project, slide it over to here. So we would reduce the actual borrowing we would take out this year. But the levy now with that 750. So it truly is additional expenditures. It's just saying that I would actually go out for 11.2. I would only be going out for 10.5 for actual borrowing. So this would say we're sitting at about 11.2. I know there was some discussion as Alder Johnson had asked whether or not we leave the 1.1 million in for City Hall. That's, I know, an item that's kind of been pending. Whether or not Director Grenier had mentioned there is the Main Street Bridge of $2 million. Those are items, or any other any other program within the general levy that that you wanted to discuss. Anything like any of the projects, whether or not you wanted to move them out, leave them in, discuss. Those would be items that would be, eligible for maybe trying to reduce this 11.3. Let me just jump to the bottom and then we'll come back to that. So right now there's a request for TIF in the shipyard for another $2 million, all funded by TIF payments. Sanitary is looking for $4.3 million. However, they have different programs that is reducing, they either have carryover or, I remember the other reason why. The $2 million is from their budget, and then they have carryover. So they are actually, even though they have a $4.3 million worth of expenses, they are actually only asking to bond $460,000. Parking utility has $811,000 request. They have $100,000 of fund balance that they're willing to put toward this budget to only borrow $711,000. And then storm, again, between the different funding sources, they are looking to only borrow $927,000. So that is where the funding, again, these are all the different needs, back up the funding that is available at this time.
So
Diana, one other thing that we wanted to bring up was, again, last year, council made a decision on the $2 million with the bridge hydraulics. Mayor did have a conversation with the governor. The governor's draft budget does include the $2 million for the Main Street Bridge, but that has not been vetted by the legislature yet, so we don't know where that sits.
So we have to cut about $3 million or $2.5 million. We want to be around 8.
We had a recommendation from our financial advisor to try to keep it roughly level to what you're paying off. And so they did a long-term forecast. And if you stayed at closer to 8 million for general levy, you would be able to start leveling off your payments.
So you're saying we have to cut about how much, 2.5 million then? Or stay down to the 7.5? Then we cut 3 million.
It would be about 3 million if you wanted to stay closer to 8 million.
Okay. 3 million. So 2 million could be the bridge, but we don't know yet for sure. But we also don't know when it's going to fail.
And we also don't know whether or not the money, we know there's a lot of items that go into the governor's budget, and there's always a lot of them that are stripped back out. We do not have any direction on whether or not it's going to stay in the budget, governor's budget.
Alders, we do want to make some kind of recommendation to council. I know that Alder Johnson talked about the holding the 1.1 million. I think it was about that for City Hall for, I know there's going to be this committee created because I went to Protection and Policy last night. And eventually, if we do build, we're going to have to sell the old building. So we probably have to put something into it. I'm not saying we have to do it this year, but we probably have to do the health and safety things like the roof and the electricity. If we're to sell the building, is that accurate? Director Grenier, what do you think?
I don't think he's been a party to this conversation.
Oh, he hasn't. Oh, okay. How about you? Well, yeah, Alder Johnson, what do you think?
Well, look, I mean, clearly Director Ditchite talked about how that's the same, power system that we've had in there. So we've had that for 75 years. I don't think another year is going to kill us. So personally, if I'm looking at this number, I'm thinking the bridge and City Hall are the two obvious ones that can close that gap for us.
Yes.
When we have other things in motion where we just need to buy a little bit time to determine if there's another outlet, right? So if you think about when we're sitting in these seats a year from today, we'll know of the governor's budget. I think it'd be personally a little reckless and irresponsible to spend $2 million on replacing, the hydraulics when there's a chance that the state might cover it. I think we got to see that. Failure's a possibility. We recognize that. But that's with everything that the city owns. And I think the same goes for City Hall. So to me, those are the two things that buy us time that have the least impact on the necessities that we need for day-to-day operations.
I agree. I don't really have any pushback on that. And I think it would be a good recommendation to make to council.
But I would also just acknowledge as well that we can't delay those decisions indefinitely, right? I want to be clear, those need to be very serious conversations a year from now when we know the outcome of those two dialogues.
Right. Alder Galvin, what do you think? We're to the point of making a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. I always hate putting off fixing roofs because a leaking roof can cause so many other problems other than just water dripping on your head as you're working. It can get an electrical, it can cause damage in walls. It's just a lot it can do. The electrical system, I love what electricity does for us, but it scares the hell out of me. The potential. You see, look at Alder Johnson's lights just went out.
Yeah, they keep doing that.
This is the stuff that can happen. But and so that concerns me because if we lose the electricity at City Hall, it's not going to be pretty. And I also think about people getting injured from some of these things. But in the short term, those seem like the wisest decisions to make at this time. And everything's hindsight, but I think those two things make the most sense at this point in time. If we're going to put something off, those are the ones I think we should do.
Alder Corpus Dex?
So those two together are what? 3.5?
3.1.
3.1. It brings us almost exactly to where we need to be.
Okay. The only reason I was asking is, with like the roof situation, could that be done with if we cut it at 3 million?
Well, I thought the electricity was this year, but am I wrong? Was it the roof this year?
I think I'll let Director Ditchite talk to that item.
Director Ditchite?
Yeah, we were just proposing to replace the electric this year, and then the roof would be next year as part of the start of the mechanical replacements, because we can't replace the roof until we decide whether or not we're going to replace the mechanicals.
Okay. Okay.
But ultimately, I agree, those two projects.
And that, I agree with Alder Johnson too, that we're not putting them off indefinitely. We're looking at a year because we'll have some answers about things in a year. So Director Ellenbecker, do we want to make a motion to council to like accept the CIP with those two items taken out, and then having, you'll figure out the exact number of what we'll be at, but we'll be close to where we really should be at about 7.5 million with that, I think.
We'll be at, I have it on the screen right now, you'll be about $8.2 million borrow. That's the borrowing request. We will be sliding 750,000 because there's enough park projects to slide that. So
Okay.
we would technically be bonding for the general levy and 1.5 million, but 750,000 will get paid by the, so you're really going up $8.2 million, but we will actually borrow 7.5.
Great. And that's what we're paying off. And that's really what our goal was. I mean, does someone want to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Okay. You got that motion?
Second.
All right. Motion by Alder Galvin, second by Alder Corpus Dax. Any
What was the
further
motion, Alder
discussion?
Galvin?
It's to that effect.
To that effect.
It's to that effect.
What she said.
It's to hold the $2 million for the bridge, the 1.1 million for electricity, take that out of the budget this year, and then to the ending result would be that our general levy request would be 7,445,942, which is under the 7.519 principal that we're paying off, and we try to keep it as close to the principal we're paying off as possible. So we keep things just steady. We don't increase. So that's the motion.
And I might recommend to you, Alder Dorf, that your general levy borrowing request be approximately $7.5 million, because the numbers we're talking about here are the needs we have. On top of the needs we have, there are bond issuance costs that will subtract off of that. So if we keep it at approximately 7.5 million, I think that'll provide Director Ellenbecker with the flexibility she needs to get each of the different departments the bond number they need and pay off the bond, or to cover the bond issuance costs, not knowing what those are going to be right now exactly.
And Alder Galvin, to that effect?
To that effect, what he said.
7.5 million. Okay, about. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I just want, can I just get clarification? So what will happen now is, yes, I'm able to take away a preliminary list. You guys only mentioned the general levy. That still means that we would, are you approving the TIF borrowing, the sanitary parking and storm below in that second section? Are you also, at this point, the preliminary recommendation, are you approving those items also?
I guess we better make a motion to that effect. I'll move that we approve those additional items. Is there a second?
I got
Second by
it.
Alder Galvin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, at this point, so at this point, what happens, I'll be going back and I'll be taking this preliminary list back to our financial advisors, going back to our bond council. We will be pulling all the details together, verify the funding, and then we'll be bringing the recommendation for borrowing through on June 22nd with initial resolutions going to council on 6/29 then.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, informational. Contingency funds at 150,000 right now. That may change. We'll see. Next Finance Committee meeting will be held Tuesday, June 22nd at 4:30.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Alder Galvin.
Come on, someone's got to second.
Come on, Alder Johnson, you can say it.
I said it. Didn't you hear it?
Oh,
Second.
no, second by Alder Johnson. All
I'm
those in
afraid you
favor
guys
say
wanted to
aye.
do this. Oh, aye.
Aye, aye.
Make us
Sorry,
pass on
Director Grenier, he's already gone. All right, happy anniversary. All those in favor, aye, aye. We're adjourned. Bye.
All right.